support for foreign aid to Israel has been monotonically decreasing. There's been no year in which it has gone up. I thank Marjorie Taylor Greene every week for getting elected so that I'm only the most hated man in Washington, D.C. The only place where I pay a price for that position is when my blanket prohibition on voting for foreign aid also incorporates Israel.
Thomas Massie just revealed the truth about AIPAC and the Israel lobby and why it has such influence over the U.S. government. And in this clip, he gets into why his blanket opposition to all foreign aid as a Republican doesn't put any crosshairs on his back until it also includes one specific country, and I think we all know what that country is. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
Your basic point on foreign aid and foreign intervention is it's not our business.
Right. I've never singled out Israel. I just want no foreign aid. I don't vote for foreign aid. It gets me in trouble sometimes because foreign aid will be in another bigger bill. And I'm like, well, I'm not for the foreign aid. I'm not voting for this. I don't vote for it when it's aid for a war. Like I have never voted to fund the war in Ukraine. And so, I'm not picking on Ukraine. I'm not picking on Israel. I don't pick on any country. Georgia, which has been back and forth with Russia over that. In Afghanistan, I don't vote for that. It's gone on so long. I just don't vote for any of it. I've never singled out Israel. In fact, I never criticized Israel. I've criticized the war that they're waging right now. But there are people in Israel that are criticizing the war that they're waging right now. In fact, this is why they bring Netanyahu to Congress. I can tell you exactly how this happens. Mike Johnson doesn't sit around thinking, oh, man, it's been like 6 months since we had Netanyahu here. We should invite Netanyahu again to address all of Congress and the Senate all at once. What happens is his support for his war wanes, not just globally, but domestically. And the State Department gets on the phone and calls up the speaker and says, we need for Netanyahu to look strong, and we want him to give an address to the joint Congress. So,
does anyone doubt this at this point? That's exactly what it is, an orchestrated propaganda scheme with Netanyahu going in front of Congress, getting more praise and adulation than any president would get, whether it was Biden or Trump. And it's totally choreographed to propagandize the American people in English. It's also why a lot of Netanyahu's addresses are in English, directed to the American people to support Israel first. And look, Thomas Massie is reflecting the real America first mentality. Let's just call it America only, because that's what he believes, and that's the correct position. He wouldn't even go as far as I would when it comes to criticizing Israel, but, people will scapegoat Massie and say, oh, he's not real MAGA, even though he's actually reflecting the best elements of what Trump talked about in his campaign and why we needed to stop all these foreign wars. Well, we still get them nonetheless, and it is because of AIPAC and the Israel lobby. People will call him an isolationist, but guess what? He also wants to trade with Ukraine and Israel. He also wants diplomacy with Israel and Ukraine. He isn't an isolationist. He's a Ron Paul non-interventionist. There's a clear difference there. And what can you say? This is an admirable attitude that's so rare in Washington.
This will make him look important on the world stage if he's standing there in front of 535 members of the legislature of the most powerful country in the world, advising them and informing them on things in their own chamber. And so that's the reason they have. It's not because Netanyahu's giving a particularly insightful speech or something that we couldn't read ourselves. It's to prop him up and to prop up the war, support for the war.
Yeah. I want to talk about Netanyahu for just a second, because I'm thinking of that gathering he had with conservative influencers. I think it was it was in conjunction with that. And he was giving marching orders to how he can control the narrative in the United States about what Americans should think about him and his war.
Yeah, he was strategizing with American Zionist influencers, and guess what the strategy centered upon? censorship. I hope this deal with TikTok goes through. Why? Because the American people saw a lot of imagery and videos out of Gaza through TikTok that they just couldn't ignore. It showed Israel's atrocities for the first time to many Americans that hadn't been privy to them. That's why he wants Andreessen Horowitz and Larry Ellison to buy this out. Oh yeah, and we have to talk to Elon Musk, right? What do you mean talk? Well, we know implicit in that is censor oppositional sentiments toward Israel, obviously. How dare him come to this country and talk about how to best propagandize Americans in his direction? It robs us of our sovereignty in every single way. It's a total slap in the face, especially if you're going to still parrot the America First narrative after enduring and then embracing that strategy. No, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Well, we talked about in the last segment about labeling requirements for beef, and that we should have country of origin labeling on our beef. I think we should have country of origin labeling on our political donations and campaigns in the United States. Like which country or which countries lobby. So AIPAC is very careful to point out that their donors are Americans, but they're still a foreign lobby. And the Foreign Agent Act doesn't say that it doesn't matter where your money comes from. You're still required to register as a foreign agent. If you can be an American, you can just be doing it on your own effort, not even paid.
And this is why John F. Kennedy tried to get the precursor to AIPAC to register under FARA. Look what happened to him several months later. But the precursor to AIPAC was the AZC, the American Zionist Council. Not only did Kennedy try to get them to register, we still have documentation of letters sent from the Kennedy administration to the AZC showing this. LBJ kind of abandoned that, but Kennedy also tried to get Israel to be open to inspections at the Dimona site where they stole American nuclear weapons technology. Ultimately, that didn't happen either. So that's where we're at now.
But if you're taking any kind of direction or orders from the country and you're advocating for that country, which AIPAC does, they're organizing trips over there. They're obviously interacting with their legislature and Netanyahu and all of that stuff. They're not going it on their own. And so they should be registered, but so should, I think, all of these social media accounts that are funded or paid for with foreign dollars. That should be completely disclosed.
It's pretty obvious that the people at that event were somehow receiving funding from Israel or Israel-adjacent organizations.
Yeah, I mean, Max Blumenthal blew the cover off this. There's a widespread program to pay Zionist influencers up to $7,000 per pro-Israel post. You've seen that all the time, and I'm so glad that's become a meme, by the way, with so many people on the internet and on Twitter replying to those obvious, schemes to propagandize on the part of a foreign regime, replying to those sentiments with 7K. Here's your $7,000. That's exactly what happened here. He's totally correct, and this would not fly if there was this kind of lobby for, say, Qatar or Russia. The Zionists would be the first ones to call this out and say, this is a foreign lobby. They already say that, even though Russian and Qatari lobbies would have to register under FARA and get inhibited in various political ways, financial ways for having to do that. There's just a special carve-out for Israel's foreign lobby. And Massey's exactly right. It doesn't matter if the dollars come from Americans. That's how they shield this. They're corroborating and collaborating with Israel's government. What have they tried to lobby for that isn't conducive to what Netanyahu wants? Literally nothing. That's all it exists for.
Suggest a little sticker, like a USDA sticker that you get on your steak. Maybe just put it on their lapel. But that would include most members of your party, apparently, at this point.
Yes. I think Marjorie Taylor Greene and I are maybe...
You guys don't get a sticker.
We don't get a sticker. If these were NASCAR uniforms, we would not be sponsored by AIPAC. Both of us also have something else in common. We don't let them in our office. And I'm not picking on Israel. If you're with the Turkish lobby, or I guess there's probably people say right now Qatar is influencing our government. I've never seen a lobbyist from Qatar who says they're from Qatar knocking on my door. There are ones, from like Turkey that try to have influence, and I just don't meet with foreign lobbyists. I mean, you got to be from my district advocating for something in my district.
Yeah, let's be real. The Qatari lobby just doesn't really exist to the extent that the Zionists say whatsoever. There isn't, control over 361 representatives by Qatar, no matter what they say. That's the new form of gaslighting. Just like, the 6-foot rule, 2 weeks to slow the spread, the Hunter Biden laptop story is disinformation. January 6th is an insurrection. It's just the latest propaganda scheme that they're trying to push.
Yeah. Well, let's, we're bumping up on, we got about 10 minutes left, and I want to talk about the war itself. And one of the things that frustrates me with so-called conservatives who are really, and I'll just mention Ted Cruz as one of these guys, Senator Ted Cruz, who says that defending Israel is like his first priority. I don't ever remember him saying that when he actually ran as a Tea Party Republican in 2010. Don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but the thing that frustrates me with Israel first type conservatives is that they make this ultimately quite collectivist argument that the innocents that are dying in Gaza are somehow deserving of that because they supported Hamas. And I'm thinking particularly of, Justin Amash had, I think, 2 cousins killed.
Christian cousins.
Right. Killed almost 2 years ago in some of the first attacks from Israel into Gaza. But how can a conservative make that argument? Because the people that pay the price for war are not the perpetrators. It's all the collateral damage and cannon fodder in the middle.
And not only will they make that argument, they'll go to a pro-life rally the next day. They'll say, I'm pro-life, but these people are human shields. Israel can defend itself. That's what's being done in Gaza. That's the argument they make. The disconnect and hypocrisy is absurd. It has to be. If you're going to say I'm pro-life, but this is just, Israel defending itself, the Hamas is the ultimate villain and Israel gets to hold these people in subjugation in perpetuity and kill 100,000 of them, if that's what it means, it's absurd.
In Washington, D.C., you get what you incentivize. And so for Senator Cruz to make that statement, there's almost no cost. But the benefit is great if you look at the donations that would ensue from that. And then also, although the demographics of your district or state may be such that it's not obvious that there's a benefit to making that statement, except that there are organizations in the Christian churches that where if you make that statement, there's an electoral advantage to making that statement. Although that's changing. So let me tell you some insight I have. I hate that in Washington we're oftentimes just regurgitating things and there's no original source. We're expressing opinions. As an engineer, I'd like to bring some facts to this. So I've had the same position on foreign aid since I got elected in 2012. And the only place where I pay a price for that position, or could pay a price for that position, is when my blanket prohibition on voting for foreign aid also incorporates Israel.
Of course it does, because it's the Israel first mentality that has swept over the swamp, swept over Washington, D.C., and exerts by far disproportionate influence in this government compared to any other country. By far. You can argue it exerts more influence than American influence in this government. By far. I mean, the war in Iran showed us. Bankrolling and genocide in Gaza showed us. Trump pleading for the Knesset to drop charges against Netanyahu in terms of fraud and corruption. That shows it. Recognizing the Golan Heights shows it. Moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem shows it. Ripping up the JCPOA shows it. On and on and on again. This is just what you get. And to justify the behavior of the Israeli mass murdering rogue government in Gaza by saying that Hamas was voted into power by the Palestinians. All right, that happened in 2005 or 2006? Half the people in Gaza now are children that couldn't have voted in that election. And in that election, a plurality cast their votes in favor of Hamas. It was less than 50%. So of that remaining populace that was even able to vote, it wasn't nearly the amount of people that even voted for Hamas at that time. This is just an excuse that conservatives would never use to say, hey, you voted into power Joe Biden, so now you get to be subjugated to this foreign government, to Russia in perpetuity. They can kill you and call you human shields, and it doesn't matter because those people supported Joe Biden. Might not have even been you, but that's an absurd excuse. It just falls apart in every single way.
I don't vote for foreign aid to any country, including Israel. So since 2014, I have been polling. When you do polls about your election, you don't just ask, am I going to win or is the other guy going to win, right? You ask things that will inform you about your opponent's vulnerabilities and also things about your own vulnerabilities and maybe things where you just want to know. It doesn't change your position. You just want to know how much does this position cost you? Is it a liability? So since 2014, I've asked the same question on my polls, which may have up to 40 questions. And that is, I phrase it the same way every year so I can compare apples to apples. The U.S. government gives about $3.8 billion annually to the country of Israel. Which of the following choices describes your opinion of this? And the first choice is we should give them more money. The second choice is that's about right. The third choice is we should give them less. And then the fourth choice is we should give them nothing at all. And I've been asking that same question for over a decade on my polls. And what I have noticed, to use an MIT term or a math term, support for foreign aid to Israel has been monotonically decreasing. That means it may not decrease at the same rate every year, but every year it has decreased. There's been no year in which it has gone up.
I mean, that's of no surprise, especially with more and more Americans fading away from this mentality that so many of their parents and grandparents held. This is so apparent now on the American right in that poll that came out recently that showed a 50-point swing in terms of sympathy toward the Palestinians has swung 50 points since October 7th. I don't know that this trajectory can be stopped in any way because the acts of the Zionists are just amplifying why this is such a backward idea to keep funneling money into this rogue state. And if anything, Massie's being charitable because he's right. Before October 7th, it was $3.8 billion going to Israel yearly. But since October 7th, it's been about $25 billion total dollars. So that's been ramped up to the nth degree since October 7th. And the only real America First option of those ones he laid out was option 4. No more foreign aid, including to Israel. And I'm sorry that that's your sacred cow, AIPAC, but that's where Americans are right now that are truly America First, that want to care about domestic concerns over your rogue regime committing a genocide.
It's monotonically decreasing. And this year, and this poll is pretty fresh, this is a couple months old, maybe 6 weeks old, was the first time that among the Republican primary voters in Kentucky's 4th congressional district that over half the people chose nothing at all or less than what we're giving them. And so we not only have we been moving in a trend, we've crossed the threshold where now in a Republican primary, and I can only speak for one congressional district in Kentucky, my position that I've held since 2012 is now more favorable than less favorable.
Amen. Isn't that a beacon of hope? People will watch this program and say, I'm so cynical, but here is our source of hope. Here's our white pill, something that we can be proud of. There's more to it than this that, would stroke some hope into our, depressed souls when watching this government, like the death of the legacy media, the rise of the independent media. But this is one thing I think dissidents on both poles, the left and the right, can unite on.
And it is causing people to donate to me. When you are singular and hold a position that is the majority position in the Republican Party, but you're the only Republican in Washington, D.C. holding that position, you're going to find a lot of support. And that's what I'm finding when I oppose this war in Gaza or when I oppose foreign aid to all countries.
That's amazing. Again, this actually lifts my soul, lifts my spirits in so many ways. I think Marjorie Taylor Greene could be considered that too. He might not be the only Republican that has this standpoint. She does too. But this is exactly correct.
Just Israel. I don't know if it was in this segment or the segment we taped before, but you alluded to me being the most hated person in Washington, D.C. I have to tell you, I thank Marjorie Taylor Greene every week for getting elected so that I'm only the most hated man in Washington, D.C.
Well, amen. The two have been as heroic as you can possibly be on the Republican side of the aisle since all this Israel First nonsense broke out. And it's really broken out in my entire lifetime, but especially since October 7th. And it just becomes too glaring and too hypocritical, both to make the centerpiece of your administration and your campaign America First when it's so clearly not, when it's so clearly Israel First, even when the two countries' interests collide as they did with negotiating with Iran to create a new JCPOA, a new IAEA-like inspections regime, but from the United States, like the JCPOA was, but improved with maybe its sunset provisions extending into a new age under Trump. We were going to do that, right? To avert a war. So they didn't have to be a war because the concern, I think speciously, was always, they're going to acquire a nuclear weapon. Well, Netanyahu's been saying that since I literally was a wee young lad. I think we have examples of him saying that in the early 90s, actually. And I know Israelis in general were saying that since the 80s. It just hasn't been the case. And Tulsi Gabbard even reported in her annual threat summary, not only didn't they have a nuke, I think this was in either April or March of this year, but there was no evidence that they had reconstituted their nuclear weapons program. And then the U.S. bombs no matter what. At first it was like, Israel's doing this on their own, don't worry about it. Then, oh, the U.S. is supplying ballistic missiles, intelligence, etc. to Israel, don't worry about it. Then it was like, oh, I guess we actually are striking Iran, don't worry about it, this isn't neocon in any way. Then floating the idea of regime change. If Iran doesn't make itself great again, why not have a regime change? Trump, Truth Social. This is indistinguishable and perhaps more bellicose than the worst neocons that swept into power in the early 21st century. It's not something that should be acceptable to anyone who believes in America first. But thankfully, Thomas Massie believes in America first. He's paying the price for it. He is a pariah in Washington in his own party. Perhaps more than any other Republican has ever been a pariah in Washington in my lifetime. Maybe Ron Paul had that for sure, because the independent media hadn't even risen up at the time that Ron Paul was saying these kind of things. But that's where we're at. Thomas Massie's a hero. Protect this man at all costs. And, we say that kind of as a meme, but man, people are really gunning for him. They're going to throw maybe millions of dollars into this primary. AIPAC alone threw $400,000 into the last one to try to displace him. They're going to try even harder right now. And, diehard Zionists, including associate of Jeffrey Epstein, John Paulson, is involved in that. Miriam Adelson, surprise, surprise, is involved in that effort. Let's see where it gets him. Massie's popular in his district. I'm so glad that's the case, and I'm jealous I'm not in his district, because it might be the only time in my life that I would have felt truly represented by my representative. But what do you think? Let me know down below. Do you think Thomas Massie's a hero? Is he the real America First? What is the most backward aspect of this Israel First policy? Let me know in the comments down below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to Matt Kibbe and Free the People. He's awesome, excellent organization, heroic voice for liberty in our time is Matt Kibbe and his organization. I can't speak highly enough of him. He's awesome. I met him in person. I consider him a friend. We're not particularly close, I guess, but I think he's heroic. And if you want to become a YouTube member, maybe you like this video, click the join button below. You can help support the channel. I really appreciate that. And in return, I'll give you access to all my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. Also, if you want a free copy of my book, Compact of the Republic, click the link in the description below. You'll go off to a site. I'll email you a free copy of that book. It tells the tale how the United States used to be a loosely federated league of states that got perverted into a world empire. I tell the tale of how that took place. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.